Hello, and welcome to another episode of Plastic Surgery Unfiltered, a podcast at the intersection of healthcare, business, and the beauty industry. I'm your host, Dr. Armando Davila, joined by my co-host, Dr. David Turer. How are you today?
Great. Good afternoon.
Today, we are talking the gray zone of peptides.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one.
This is a good one. I think that's the title. I can't remember now. But, so the big question here is, why is one type of injection completely standard and other injections just feel like the Wild West?
Well, I mean, I think that peptides have become such a broadly used term. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like getting down to what is an actual peptide? A peptide is just a string of amino acids.
Okay.
So like anything that's a string of amino acids is a peptide.
Yeah, I think that, one of the things is that people think that regulation of something is based a little bit on what something is, which
Right.
is not totally true.
Right.
It's sort of based off of how it's made, how it's used, and what the claims are to a certain extent.
Right. And the process that it's gone through to prove its efficacy and its safety.
Sure.
Right.
I think that's the claims part, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so let's get into like that very basic idea. Let's start with just like, what does it mean to be FDA approved?
To be approved, right. Well, there are a variety of mechanisms by which something can be approved. And we'll use approved as a broad term because there's actually a variety of different terms that the FDA uses to say that something is okay to use. Approved, cleared, registered, we can get into each of those.
Okay.
But I think that especially in our industry, there is a big distinction between things that are approved, drugs, devices, biologics, even to some degree things like tissue products.
Okay.
And cosmetics.
Okay.
And this is where I think there's a lot of confusion, and a lot of the things out there, like what we would consider the Wild West, come from, right?
There's a third category, supplements.
That's another. Well, that actually technically falls, I would say, into that first category.
Which one? Drugs?
They are. It depends. It depends because supplements can be registered with the FDA. Let's hold off on that for.
Are cosmetics not registered?
Cosmetics are also registered, but
So-
they are not. So I guess in that sense, you're
So in
right.
my mind, like cosmetics and supplements are in the same bundle because they're registered, but not.
That is true from
Okay.
that standpoint, yes, because there's no burden to show any efficacy or even any safety with cosmetics or supplements.
Correct.
Right. So this is where, and a lot of people get in trouble because of the marketing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So again, we have drugs, devices, things like that. We have cosmetics. People love to talk about things like cosmeceuticals. This is
Okay.
a cosmeceutical.
Sure.
Why? Because it sounds really fancy because it's a cosmetic backed by science.
Backed by science,
Well,
right.
guess what? In the eyes of the FDA, no such thing exists.
Correct.
You are either a drug or a device or a cosmetic.
Correct.
And this is something I want to put out there because I think it's really interesting. Drugs and devices are things that are designed to affect the structure or function of the body, right? I think it's pretty clear what that means for most of those things,
Maybe.
to some degree. Cosmetics in the original sense that they were categorized were meant to affect the appearance of the body, right? So if you put makeup on, if you put lipstick on, that affects the appearance of the body.
Right.
Right?
Well, yes, exactly. So that's like where the original term comes from, right?
Right.
So you put on lipstick, and this has improved the appearance of your lips.
Correct. Now, so how do people use things or market things that are really probably more in the drug and device world, but haven't had any kind of testing or approval by the FDA? If you read their marketing, what it says is that this, whatever it is, improves the appearance of fine lines, improves the appearance of wrinkles, improves the appearance of redness. And so technically, because it is not being marketed as something that improves fine lines and wrinkles, it improves the appearance of fine lines and wrinkles. It is being marketed as a cosmetic.
Sure. So your concealer from Ulta improves the appearance of your fine lines and wrinkles.
It sure does.
And so it is the same from the eyes of the FDA as the SkinCeuticals we sell here that has a product that has some active ingredient in it, theoretically, and they list it as an active ingredient.
Right.
But what it does is it improves the appearance of fine line and wrinkles.
It does not. If you look in their marketing carefully, nowhere, unless there's a component in there that is approved by the FDA, will it say this improves so and so. It'll say it improves the appearance of so and so.
Yeah. So that's like the key thing. Like if you're watching this, because this is really tailored, I think, more for providers. But if you're watching this as a consumer, you can probably stop the episode right around here. That is really all you need to see. When you pick up a bottle of anything, or you're being offered something, or you're asking a question to a provider, if it really is just saying that kind of key line, it is not really a drug,
device, tissue product, biologic, anything with any kind of approval.
Yeah, or regulatory process.
Correct.
So
now let's be clear. Cosmetics and, like you said, supplements are registered with the FDA.
And they do have some degree, like they can have some regulatory process. It's just a completely different
registered,
one.
but it doesn't have to show efficacy and safety.
Sure.
Which is very different.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because again, no one thinks you're going to like die from your lipstick. Now, it still has some sort of protective framework, because if like your lipstick is laced with arsenic or something, like the FDA has to know
and a path to go back and
trace it.
Trace it exactly.
Yeah. But it doesn't. It hasn't really been tested.
Right. I think, and this is like when we started talking about peptides. I think this is where people have to be a little bit careful, right? Because just because something is being offered as usable doesn't mean it's been approved in any way.
Sure.
And let's say someone is selling a peptide to be used topically, and they're saying, oh, this improves the appearance of so and so. There could still be an active ingredient in there that's doing something, but it has no real efficacy or safety testing behind it.
Sure. So before peptides, recently this came up with exosomes, right?
Exosomes are a big one.
And so exosomes sold as a cosmetic. I think Plated has nailed this particular section. And so they created a product that is meant to be applied topically, and it improves the appearance of et cetera, et cetera. And so they are firmly planted in the cosmetic territory. A different company went and put them in little vials and then sold them as a kit where you kind of injected them. And that got the FDA really pissed.
Yeah, there were a bunch of companies that were offering, and basically, obviously,
Benev, was that Benev?
Benev, yeah. They were one of them. There were several.
There's several, but that was again the idea that you're going to take that exosome, you're going to inject it, and now you're taking what is a cosmetic, and fundamentally trying to affect the function of the body.
Right. And this has been a point even like you and I have discussed, but once something is introduced into the body, whether it's injected or administered IV, there is some inherent understanding that is now kind of translating into drug and device territory. Now we talked about supplements.
So what happens? Okay, so if I have vitamin D at GNC, is it GNC? GNC. GNC. I pick up my little GNC vitamin D and I ingest it. That's a supplement.
Right.
Okay.
Because it's ingested.
Okay, but then suddenly if I like cook it on a spoon and like inject it in my body, what does it become?
I think at that point it would be essentially an unregulated drug.
Well, now, yeah, because I'm creating it.
Now, but remember, there are injectable versions that are approved as drugs of almost all of the key nutrients and vitamins.
Yeah, and we didn't know this. We actually had to look this up because I was like, I just thought this was a supplement, and for some reason you're injecting it, and it's still in the supplement category. No, it's indicated for something, and what it's indicated for is
the correction of a nutrient deficiency.
Yeah, so if you have deficiency of vitamin D, the indication is inject that nutrient. And so, which is interesting because the supplement is not indicated for the...
Right, because it has no indication. Because it's not approved.
Because it's not approved, it's just a supplement. So your supplements don't. It's almost like we don't actually know if it's for the deficiency.
And then even more interesting is you can compound approved drugs with certain unapproved substances that the FDA has deemed to be safe enough to compound with those drugs, which is how compounding pharmacies get away with a lot of the things that they do.
Right, and that's on that list. What's the list called?
It's basically the approved. It's like the approved compounding like substances.
Yeah, so they have a list. The FDA keeps a list of substances that can be essentially mixed into the...
Right. Like we looked at, like NAD is a good example, right? Like a lot of companies will mix one of the GLPs with NAD, and it's totally fine to do that because it's on the list of approved substances that can be compounded.
Right.
And it's totally
Or,
fine.
and it's important to note, it's not that it's approved, because I don't like to use that language. It's that it's not banned.
It is not banned.
Correct.
That's it. Great. Correct.
And so, because approval gets confusing, it's essentially the FDA keeps a list of sort of drugs that haven't been banned, and then a list of drugs that absolutely have
careful.
been. Sorry,
Again, the terminology is so important, right? It's not substances.
Substances.
Yeah.
Substances that are allowed to be mixed in. They're not drugs.
Right.
They're substances that can be mixed in that are not banned, and then a list that are banned.
Yeah. And now this is where we get into some of the peptide discussion.
Correct.
Because if you look carefully at that list of banned compounded substances, we find some of the things that are being marketed as peptides.
Correct.
And so I think that is where people need to be extremely careful.
Yes. And so this is where you get to the provider part, right? Because, essentially there's this, I'm going to pull up my notes here, right? It's like, why is it that you can just buy these things online? And it's like, it's actually easier to buy them online because they're not actually classified as drugs, right? What is sort of interesting is like heroin is a drug, right? And the FDA has classified it as a drug, and it's a Schedule 1 drug, which means it has no functional medical use, right? And therefore it is illegal, right? But it is a drug.
Actually, that's something I have to look up. I don't know if the illegal drugs are actually classified in the same way as other drugs.
Yeah, they're drugs. Yeah, they're drugs. And so they have no formal approval because they don't have a medical purpose.
No medical indication.
Correct.
Or use.
And so they're classified as a certain substance, right? And so they're not sellable because they're classified as a drug, but then restricted.
Right.
And so...
Although for research purposes, I'm sure you can buy that stuff too. I'm sure that you can buy...
No, I mean, that's the problem with marijuana and LSD, right? They're classified as Schedule 1, so you can't fundamentally generate funding from the government or from other entities for research in those things because they're restricted drugs.
I'm not sure that that's true, though, because let's say at NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse, I'm sure they study some of those things. You have to be able to get them somehow.
I know, but I think that's a huge point of contention where you can't get a federally funded study to study illegal drugs because
that I don't
that's a whole nother topic.
Sure. Yeah,
but right, the interesting thing about these peptides that are on this list are because they're not a drug, they're a substance.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about what makes something a drug or a device.
Go ahead.
Right. So, I think most people know the term FDA-approved. And FDA-approved means that whatever it is, whether it's a drug or device, it has gone through a rigorous process to test. And initially, usually there's 3 phases of trials. The early phases are to test safety, make sure that it's safe to administer.
Yep.
Assuming that it's safe enough.
I think phase 1 is it doesn't kill you. Phase 2 is that it assesses side effects. Phase 3 is efficacy. And so in order for something to be approved, you have to demonstrate efficacy, right? So a cancer drug has to show some efficacy that it improves cancer, right? Like Botox had to show some efficacy that it improves lines and wrinkles. Devices actually are approved as well. Now, it's confusing because devices are approved through what's called a PMA, a pre-market approval. If this is the first of its kind, a device has to go through and demonstrate all those things similarly to a drug, and then you get the de novo approval. But once something is approved, if there is another device that is similar enough that it basically does the same thing as something else, there's a whole other regulatory pathway to get, it's called clearance. So you can get what's called a 510K. So you use the predicate device, and then this new device, as long as you show equivalence, can get cleared so it can be used. Correct. In drugs, you have to still, I think, undergo phase 3 trials.
Yeah, drugs I think are different.
And if you're trying to be similar to another drug, you at least have to prove non-inferiority.
Right.
So,
but so there is a totally different process for things that are approved by the FDA as opposed to things that are just not banned by the FDA.
Okay. So then, what makes something a biologic?
So biologics are complex molecules. Like the most common example of this would be something like a monoclonal antibody.
Okay.
And so I believe that they go through essentially the same testing process as a drug because they're used in a very similar way.
Okay. But if you take PRP, like I draw PRP from you, is it a biologic?
I think technically it is. Now, it's even more confusing because in order to do that, you have to use something that is approved essentially as a device to create that in situ, like in your practice. Now, I believe that out in the world, the way that they're created can be a little bit different, but like not everything that touches it necessarily needs to be an FDA-approved device, but there are certain practices that need to be followed in order for that to be considered safe. Now,
the tissue products. So
tissue products are a whole different deal.
Okay, what's tissue?
Because tissue products are like, one of the biggest tissue bank in the country, I believe, is MTF, right? Like we get things like cartilage for rhinoplasty from them. We get bone graft if we're doing that kind of thing, or there's a variety of tissue products that they sell. Each tissue product is not actually approved. They are registered, but the process by which they're produced is overseen by the FDA. And so those manufacturing processes are regulated, but then the tissue products, as long as the tissue has not been significantly manipulated and is being used for what's called homologous use, which means that it is being used in essentially what its original function was. Like fat, you have to essentially use as fat.
Yes. This is sort of weird. So I was talking to a patient. I don't have all the details, but essentially she's going to try to treat her type 1 diabetes with an islet cell transplant. Okay. Now the islet cell transplant is, this is unverified, so hearsay here, but it is not a tissue bank classification because it's been modified in some way. And the FDA has decided this is, even though it's been harvested from another person, it's going to be injected. You have to take immunosuppressant. It's been modified enough that now it's become a biologic.
Some of these more like unusual things have more intricate regulatory pathways, but that's obviously not something that like most people are dealing with most of the time. And on top of that, if it's experimental, then you're going through an IRB as well.
Yeah, the interesting thing, right, is probably if you just transplanted the pancreas, then there is no experimental nature to it. You're just saying that this is a tissue transplant.
And that is done. Islet cell transplants from the same person can be done. Like, for example, with a total pancreatectomy, you can take that, extract islet cells, and re-inject them as an islet cell transplant.
Okay. But then the minute you're doing it from someone else, if there's significant processing...
I guess that's a good question. Is that more like a traditional transplant, like a solid organ transplant, which has its own set, I'm sure, a whole other set of regulations?
The only reason I'm talking about this particular class is because an exosome is in the sort of biologic, right? It is a set of... It is the components that would be expected to be in like PRP or PRF.
Right.
And then it's been repackaged into a liposomal container, so it's been modified. Therefore, it enters into biologic territory.
Right. It's this, like a biologic is something, let's say, for the monoclonal antibodies are very specific, but they're produced by another organism. So it's this kind of a little bit more heterogeneous substance than just a pure drug.
Sure, because it's not a chain of amino acids. It's like whole components.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, it got derived from some source, and then it's being transferred over. So again, in the story of exosomes, if you just put that in a pump and put it on your face, and then say it improves the appearance of, then
because it's not being marketed to do anything.
Yes,
so to speak. Right.
Yeah.
That's again going back to our earlier conversation, because they're saying it improves the appearance of. They're kind of getting around it a little bit, but they're not making a claim that it actually does anything.
Sure, but then the minute you inject it,
right?
Maybe we're not claiming anything. If the injector, like let's say you're an injector somewhere in town, and you take that exosomes from Benev, and it's marketed as to improve the appearance of, and you're like, oh, well, I can just draw it up a syringe and inject it. Aren't I improving the appearance of the face?
Right.
No.
Because it's now been introduced to the body, and in order to affect that change, you would have to affect the structure or function of the body.
And suddenly it becomes a drug, or maybe this in biologics.
Drug
you're injecting essentially an unregulated drug. This is not an off-label use.
And this, we've talked about this before, but I think in recent history, this came up with PDGF.
Yes.
Right. And this created a huge argument amongst a lot of people who I think didn't understand the regulatory nomenclature.
Correct.
Right. So PDGF is a substance that is part of multiple FDA-approved things. There are devices with PDGF. There is a drug for topical use with PDGF. There is no pure PDGF that is approved by the FDA to be injected. So when this company was going around marketing PDGF, it came in a kit loaded in syringes, clearly meant to be injected.
And then they said on the syringe, do not inject.
Not for injection. And so, they're going around saying, oh, you can use this topically post-procedure, which is like a whole nother, gray zone, but fine, right? Like improves the appearance of. But then behind the scenes, there was like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, go ahead and inject it. And people were going, well, PDGF is approved by the FDA, and so this is off-label use. No, you can't have an off-label use unless you have an on-label use.
Exactly.
And that particular form was not approved, so it had no on-label use. So you were injecting a totally unapproved, unregulated substance.
It's an unregulated substance, and I think that's a great word to use. It's an unregulated substance. There is no regulatory pathway or regulation step that the FDA has taken. So as a provider, if you are injecting something that is an unregulated drug, you are doing so in a way that could cause you to lose your license.
Or be prosecuted.
Right. Because it would be like taking
anything.
You
go to Home Depot, get some silicone off the shelf and inject it in someone's butt as a BBL.
Yes.
It is essentially the exact same thing.
It's the exact same thing in the eyes of the FDA and the law. And so that is... And I mean, there were some serious complications with PDGF.
Yeah, I mean, people have granulomas. They have issues. I mean, and it's like, well, it's no big deal because it's a drug. It's off label. Whatever. It's not. Like, you are opening yourselves to huge liability by doing that.
And so let's get back to peptides.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you have something that's not a biologic, right? It's a chain of amino acids. Could be manufactured in a test tube in a lab, right? It could be manufactured without any organism, right? So, what is happening?
Well, so there's all these substances out there that people are making claims do things. That, they help heal, they improve recovery, they improve stamina, whatever it is. And all that may be true. But if it's not approved by the FDA and you're injecting these things, you're kind of doing it at your own risk.
Sure.
And so, for the probably the most common.
So question, why can someone go online, buy whatever, whatever 10 MOD, 1064 or whatever, they can inject it in their body. But it's illegal to inject heroin.
Because it's not banned by the FDA.
But it is banned. It's on the banned substances list.
It's banned for compounding. But like the FDA doesn't specifically ban every substance in the world, right? Again, like in my mind, these unregulated peptides are no different than, just going to the grocery store and buying a thing of olive oil or going to Home Depot or a thing of silicone. I mean?
So this is like that woman who was doing silicone injections and she was getting her stuff from Home Depot, right?
Yeah.
And then she injected it, which made it a drug in the eyes of the FDA.
Probably a device.
Okay, drug or device.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever.
Exactly.
And now she's practicing medicine without a license because only physicians or providers, medical providers, can inject drugs or devices, right? And so that's where she got caught, right?
Yep.
And more importantly, we discovered that the way the federal government really gets involved with this is the violation of interstate commerce.
Interstate commerce laws.
Right? Because interstate commerce laws is how the government gets involved in really a lot of drug discussion.
Right. Like essentially, if something is used in a way, like let's say you use a substance that it's not regulated and it has crossed state lines, they can nail you on interstate commerce charges because essentially you're using an unregulated drug.
Correct.
Or device.
And that's why a lot of the marijuana regulation is kind of escaping to a certain degree because it's staying within state borders and then the state is controlling it. And so as long as it doesn't cross state borders, you're escaping interstate commerce.
Yeah.
And then
what's interesting that we learned is that actually, each state has a very specific set of laws that govern these things as well. What constitutes a device, a drug, an unregulated device or drug, and then what constitutes its use. And so, most of the states, like in PA, they're pretty specific about saying that you can't just like go and grind a plant up and like start injecting it into people.
As a provider. Yeah. So like if, let's say I believe in a certain thing and I go and I find a plant, a consumer can grind up that plant
And do what they want with
and
it.
do what they want with it, right? Now, if that plant is the poppy plant and they make heroin out of
Right.
it.
Well, then.
No. But
Sure.
then they're injecting an illegal drug, which, again, there's different laws and different opinions onto what people should be able to do with themselves. But that is, that's their body, their choice, right? And that's why they can, to a certain extent, order these medications, inject them, no problem.
Right.
Now, if you're a provider of any type that you are licensed and regulated in the state of PA or any state that you are in, and now you have taken this substance that is not only on the banned
compounding list,
right? And then you are injecting it into the person. Like that's trouble.
I think you need to be really careful.
Careful with that. And so, and not all peptides are the same. There's different ones. There are some that are not on the list, some that are. And again, the people can order them and do what they want. I'm not here to claim efficacy or not efficacy, but there is going to be issues when you are a provider, and this is really why this is for the provider part.
Yeah.
And so it was really fascinating to watch. I mean, we even went to a talk. I can't remember which company it was, but they invited a lot of individuals from around town, and it was crazy how people just didn't even understand the basics of this. And this is complicated, right?
Yeah, I mean, I really find this stuff interesting, and every time I read about it, I learn something new because there's so much nuance to all of the all of the regulatory pathways.
Yes. And I think that as providers, right, especially as physician providers, you have broad latitude to practice medicine and broad latitude to go, quote, off-label or whatnot. But you
have to be if you're going to go off-label, you really have to make sure that something is on-label.
And then once you get into unregulated substances, effectively what you're doing is conducting a study, right?
Yeah.
That's really the only way you can really, as a physician, undergo a really legal pathway for injecting like unregulated substances.
Yep.
And so then you get into Helsinki and experimental laws.
And obviously if it's a drug, you're going to have to go through the whole new drug approval process with the FDA.
Oh, if you want to like approve it for, sorry, I yelled there, approve it for use.
Well, but no IRB will even allow you to use it without that process.
Yeah, you'd have to go to the IRB, right?
And an IRB will require...
For anybody, what is the IRB?
So IRBs are institutional review boards. They're basically government-sanctioned bodies that review research protocols and make sure that they're appropriate and that they are not going to expose subjects to undue harm.
Right?
Yeah.
And so like they're a double check against physicians or groups of people who are providers, anybody really, or companies undergoing research that is unethical or exposes people to harm. And obviously that came from the world wars and experimentals, and lots of stuff that happened.
A lot of really bad stuff.
A lot of really bad stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, let's finish up on the interstate commerce. So how is this happening, right? These companies, right? The pharmacy, I can order from wherever, California, Texas, blah, blah, blah. They're shipping a unregulated drug across state lines. How is that happening?
I mean, some of them, I think if they're compounded with something that is approved and it's not specifically banned, I guess that's okay. Like that's how you can get around that.
If it's not banned.
Yeah. A lot of places sell these compounds as research substances.
Correct.
So, as an individual, I can go and buy a vial of whatever I want for quote unquote research purposes and do whatever I want with it.
Right.
Now, what I wouldn't do is buy that, bring someone in the office and inject someone a patient with it, because now I'm administering an unapproved substance.
An unregulated substance.
Correct.
Right. Or in this case, regulated to the sense of being on the banned compounding list.
Right.
Man, what a mess, right?
Well, so people are like, this is why we talk about our industry being the Wild West, because people want to use cutting edge things. And some of these things probably do have huge benefits, and they probably are efficacious with relatively minimal side effects.
Right.
But, and I, honestly, if whatever people do in the privacy of their own home, I don't really care. Like if someone wants to try it and do it on their own, it's fine. But as providers, I think everyone needs to be educated on the implications of using these in your practice.
Yeah, and the FDA is probably slower than a lot of other regulatory bodies on the planet, right?
Sure.
But it's also the one that other regulatory agencies look at as the gold standard for everything else, and I think that could change over time.
Sure.
But that is something that we still pride, I think, in this country.
Well, and regardless whether you feel that way or not, it's still the law.
Yeah.
And so if you do that, you're exposing yourself to significant liability.
Yeah. So I think that's where we want to cover, right? I mean, there's part 3, which I think I'm gonna do on the kind of finance, like the business side of all of this, and
Sure.
kind of how these things are marketed. But yeah, I mean, I hope that gave some clarity to providers and to patients, I guess, if they really want to know.
Welcome to the Wild West.
Welcome to the Wild West, guys. Thanks for joining us.